Meta and OpenAI have a book piracy problem, and I wanted to talk about some of the key points that are enumerated in a article from The Atlantic. The name of the article is The Unbelievable Scale of AI Pirated Books Problem. It leads with saying Meta pirated millions of books to train its AI. Search through them here. So to start with, I'll say that I did do a search of this article. It has a link to a way to search LibGen, and I was able to find 10 of the books that I wrote. So I've written 10 books, all 10 are pirated from Meta. Meta really is going to exploit people at scale. They've been doing this from inception. If you think about the history of Meta, it was about exploitation. Mark Zuckerberg, who is born in a very wealthy family, him and his sister both attended Harvard, has had privilege his entire life. The very first thing he does at Harvard is create a website that is able to rate women that without their consent, whether they're hot or not. So really, he's already exploiting and abusing people, and then it kind of goes from there. And then later he exploits and abuses democracy. In the book Careless People that was recently published, he's also shown to have known that the Facebook platform helped Donald Trump get to office, and he doesn't care. In fact, finds it delightful, and maybe himself is considering a run for president. He's more thinking about things from a transactional standpoint. So is it any surprise that we look at this article that talks about how Meta is exploiting, you can almost say colonizing the digital landscape and abusing people who are vulnerable? Well, not a surprise at all. Let's go ahead and look at some of the specifics here. So in the case of Meta, this is Facebook's parent company. According to the article, they downloaded millions of pirated books from library Genesis or LibGen to train the AI model Llama 3. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, explicitly approved this stolen material, allegedly in the court documents. And this pirated database contains over 7.5 million books and 81 million resources, including things like research papers, etc. And what's surprising is that the people that worked at Meta knew it was wrong. They intentionally hid their behavior. And so we see a pattern of essentially like a criminal mafia-like behavior happening with Meta. Apparently OpenAI as well used these pirated books from the exact same source. So there's really a targeted criminal behavior that has been normalized from both Meta and OpenAI. Now, in terms of the legal situation, authors, including Sarah Silverman and others, are suing both companies for copyright infringement. I definitely would be open to it myself. We have Meta and OpenAI claiming that using the books without permission is fair use because they're transforming the original work. Now, what's a little strange, though, is if it's fair use, why didn't you buy a copy of it, right? So it eliminates some of that idea around fair use there. In terms of using BitTorrent as well, they're downloading the books. So Meta also helped potentially distribute the pirated content. So it's even worse than just stealing the content. There is a possibility that they also distributed the pirated content as well. And we also see, again, a criminal type, organization, in that Meta is hiding their tracks. Like, if what you did was fair use, why are you hiding the copyright notices and ISBN numbers unless there's something you're trying to hide or cover up? So you could think of Meta as really like a mafia type organization here. They knew they were doing medium, high risk activities. It explicitly talks about this in the article. And they use tactics that are really similar to organized crime. So they got approval from the crime boss, in this case, MZ or Mark Zuckerberg. They created a plan to hide the evidence. Again, criminals hide their evidence. They also did a calculation of the risk versus the reward. They knew that if they did this criminal behavior, they would get the rewards more quickly. And then they use employees to do the questionable work. So they're kind of outsourcing the stuff that is criminal so that the lower level employees do it, just like maybe street criminals in a drug organization, and they're finding technical loopholes to avoid getting caught. Now let's talk about ethics here next, because the chief AI officer at Meta has been making the rounds at universities and talking about responsible AI. I would make the argument that it's not even a very difficult argument to make, that if you're engaged in crime, in organized crime, in mafia type behavior, including facilitating genocide with what happened in Miramar, knowing about genocide and not doing anything about it, that you're not ethical. In fact, it's so obvious you're not ethical that you're lying when you're talking about your doing responsible AI. So if we look at the LibGen ecosystem here, it's yet another example that it was created to help researchers who couldn't afford expensive academic papers. And then, Meta and OpenAI turned into really exploiting that idea and this Robin Hood idea, but also making it into a profit-making scheme. So it's really always twisting things so that they're gaslighting people into saying that they're the good guys, right? Where maybe originally you could make the argument, well, researchers can't afford these academic papers, we're helping them out. Then Meta and OpenAI steal it and then turn it into a source of them creating revenue. So if we look at AI systems as well, ethically, they don't cite the sources. So they're hiding where they got that information. And likewise, there's a situation where writers and researchers don't get credit or payment from their work. So again, I wrote 10 books. Did they buy a copy of my books? I mean, you can't even make the argument that it's fair use because you didn't even buy it or check it out. You just stole it from a criminal organization that created this work. And also, we know that some Meta employees felt uncomfortable, and they specifically knew it was potentially a crime because they said torrenting from a corporate laptop doesn't feel right. So we have a lot of smoke here in terms of proving they're intentionally doing unethical things at scale. They're practicing unethical AI, and then they're gaslighting people. So essentially telling people they're crazy to actually to point out the fact that they're unethical, and then later going to universities and saying that they practice responsible AI. So the bigger picture here is that this really shows how big tech companies in particular are willing to break the rules to get ahead. Courts haven't decided yet if training AI on copyrighted material is legal. This is something called regulatory entrepreneurship, where the organizations will intentionally target gray areas and exploit them. Although this is a little bit different in that they're intentionally going to pirated data sets, and that's doesn't seem gray at all. That's unauthorized pirating, and potentially if they're distributing the material, that also could be a big problem. So despite being ordered to pay millions of damages, LibGen continues to operate and grow. And I guess this is the bigger picture, is like, does big tech and do these billionaire individuals, do they have the right to exploit the digital commons? And are we seeing a new form of colonization? And I think that's probably one of the better frames to look at things, is that we see the old type of colonization is big countries would go into newly discovered areas and strip all the minerals and exploit all the people and take the resources back to Europe, or in the case of Britain, take it back to the UK, etc. Now we're seeing this with big tech companies, is they find the intellectual property, strip it out, remove the attribution, and then get all the profits for it. So it's effectively like a new form of colonization. And some of the same people actually also practice old school colonization. And we see this with a lot of the stuff that's happening in Hawaii, where people are buying islands and suing people to get rid of their rights to the land of Native Hawaiians. And so there's really a big picture here in terms of the link between colonialism and also the digital colonialism. So I would say, really in a nutshell here, it's a very disturbing trend to see this kind of stuff happening with AI. And it also should be a wake-up call for universities that decide to do capstone or partnerships, that these potentially are very damaging to their brand.